What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, and you already know what week it is, man. It's Conference Championship week, and there's only one channel on YouTube where you can get all your Conference Championship previews and information, along with all the crazy breaking news that we've had this week in college football, and that's right here on the Bluebloods. So if you're new, smash the subscribe button, go ahead and like the video, and man, we're having a double header game of the week. We had the SEC Championship yesterday drop. This will be our secondary game of the week, another top 10 matchup between Baylor and Oklahoma State. So if you're new, comment below your score prediction and subscribe. If you predict the correct score along with the right team who wins, you will win our $100 Venmo giveaway, man. So make sure to comment your score predictions below. But like I said, man, we got Oklahoma State, number 5 in the country, taking on number 9 Baylor for the second time this season. And the Cowboys are 5.5-point favorites for the huge Big 12 championship going down in Arlington and Jerry World, man. 11 a.m. Central Time, live on ABC. And listen, this game couldn't be any bigger. Not only is the Big 12 on the line, but we have college football playoff implications. If one team slips up in front of Oklahoma State and they can win this weekend, Mike Gundy can put this team firmly in the national championship race, while Baylor would need a lot of help. But still, technically, some people think they have a shot at the college football playoffs, but they would need just pure chaos to happen in front of them. But these two programs are also fighting for maybe a spot at the top of the Big 12 as big changes are coming for the conference. Oklahoma and Texas will be leaving for the SEC. Baylor and Oklahoma State right now are fighting for that crown to potentially be the face of the conference moving forward. Now, let's set the stage, man. Before we get into the keys of the game, the Cowboys enter this one 11-1, 8-1 in the Big 12. They're going to be looking to win their first Big 12 title since 2011 and their second overall Big 12 title in program history, man. And the Cowboys are looking for Jaylen Warren and this stout defense that we're going to break down to carry them through this potential college football playoff run and get them a conference championship this season. Now, on the other side, man, Baylor enters at 10-2, 7-2 in the Big 12. Dave Aranda is going to be looking to win a Big 12 title in only his second season in Waco, which would be Baylor's third Big 12 championship in program history. And it's been a heavy dose of Abram Smith and a physical Dave Aranda led defense, man, that has put the Bears into position for a conference championship and a dark horse college football playoff run, man. But this series between these two teams stretches back to 1914. Oklahoma State leads at 22-18. They won this year's matchup back in that early October period, 24-14 in Stillwater. They hold a 2-game win streak over the Bears, but this is going to be the first ever matchup between these two programs with conference championship implications on the line. The first ever matchup in the Big 12 championship for these two teams. So this one's going to mean more than every other matchup that these two teams have seen, and everything's going to be right there, man. But listen, let's get to the key to the game and let's work our way down to the predictions. The key for the game for Oklahoma State has to lie on the rushing game. It's been the key for Oklahoma State all season long. Spencer Sanders does a nice job making plays with his legs, but also working off the rushing attack to establish his passing attack. And when everything's working in unison, and the rushing attack allows the offense to function at that next level, and that's going to be something they need to do against a stout Baylor defense, only allowing 120 yards per game on the ground, second in the Big 12, and they have a top 5 defense in the conference. So Oklahoma State's going to have one of their best performances, but the formula is simple for Gundy this year. Run the football, let Sanders be a playmaker while trying to limit his turnovers, and let your defense go win you the game. That's the key. That's been the formula all season long. And week in and week out, they've slowly improved as a team. And I think the Oklahoma State team you see this weekend is going to be much improved from the team you saw earlier in October this year. Now, the Oklahoma State has the fourth best rushing attack in the conference, averaging over 190 yards per game on the ground. They also average 2 touchdowns rushing per game. They've leaned on a guy who came out of nowhere, man. I've given him a lot of praise on this show. Jaylen Warren transferred in from Utah State, wasn't even expected to be a contributor, but due to injuries has stepped up in a big way. Faced a little bit of injuries down the stretch, but has really emerged as one of the faces of this offense. Over 1,100 rushing yards, 11 rushing touchdowns this season, top 5 in both touchdowns and yards this year in the Big 12 in his first season over here. But Spencer Sanders' legs always going to be a key factor as well. Over 500 yards rushing and 6 rushing touchdowns for the quarterback for the Cowboys, and then also the rotational piece that could be a secret weapon, man. Dominic Richardson, over almost 400 yards rushing, over 5 yards per carry, and 3 rushing touchdowns. Richardson, man, he's going to be someone I want to see. I want to see him worked into the game plan a little bit more. Baylor's a very physical team, a very fast team, and their linebackers are really the key to their defense. You look at Terrell Bernard at linebacker; they can wear you down up front. So I really want to see if maybe Gundy rotates these running backs a bit more this weekend. So I think that's going to be something to watch as we get into the stretch run of this game. Now, the Cowboys really thrive rushing the ball between the tackles, and really and truly they utilize their A and B gap runs to their advantage. And it's going to put a lot of pressure on the linebackers and the interior of this Baylor defense to really try to not allow Richardson and Warren to beat you up the middle, man. In the B gaps, they're averaging over 5.5 yards per carry, 7 rushing touchdowns, and have generated almost 20 explosive runs. Now, when they do bounce it outside, when you stuff the middle, you also still have to set the edge, and that's what makes this rushing attack so hard to defend. Is they're able to create plays almost anywhere, man. Off the edge, 20 explosive runs. And this is where you see the key with Jaylen Warren is after contact, over 300 yards rushing off the edge. So they can make you miss on the edge. And if you do that, that's where they can generate those explosive plays. So Baylor has to make plays in open space, and Terrell Bernard and these linebackers have to play discipline and really pick up these running backs, man. Because if Jaylen Warren gets loose, Oklahoma State's offense really goes to another level. And then also, you cannot allow Sanders to run the football. That is key. That really hurt Oklahoma last week. Sanders had a big day on the ground just on scrambles. These are not design runs. Just on when the play breaks down and Sanders gets loose, almost 300 yards rushing, over 8 yards per carry, 11 first downs, and 10 explosive runs. So if you don't account for the legs of Sanders, Baylor's going to be in a lot of trouble. They did a nice job of it against Caleb Williams and against Oklahoma, but they have to do it this weekend. A lot of people forget how athletic and what a playmaker that Sanders is. And on top of this rushing attack, man, Sanders is going to have to create some explosive plays through the air. This Baylor defense is backed by one of the best defensive minds in the country in Dave Aranda, and he's going to get a second shot at this defense, which is scary. So I'm expecting Gundy to try to add a bit more balance to this offense this weekend, and also add a few wrinkles that they didn't show against Baylor earlier this season. Now, Sanders this season has had one of his better seasons, man, completing over 60% of his passes, over 2,200 yards, 16 passing touchdowns. He's third in the Big 12 in passing yards. He's top 6 in passing touchdowns this year. But the biggest thing for him, if they can get this intermediate passing game going, that's going to be the key to this team, man. That's 10 to 19 yards down the field. At over 860 of his yards come in that range, 8 touchdowns, a 90.8 passing grade according to Pro Football Focus. And that's where a majority of their first downs, over 44 first downs generated by Sanders in that intermediate passing game. And also, if they can hit on probably 2 or 3 deep balls this game, that's going to go a long way in helping Oklahoma State win this game. On the deep ball, Sanders has 6 touchdowns, a 91 passing grade, and 13 big time throws. They don't go 20 plus yards down the field often, but when they do, Sanders has shown that he can hit it, and they're going to have to create a bit of some sort of explosive play, man, because you can trust your defense. If you can put pressure on Baylor's offense to have to score a ton of points, you're going to have a great chance to win this game. So for me, that's going to be one of the keys for Oklahoma State this weekend. Now, the wide receiver to watch, Tay Martin, absolutely, man, 61 catches, 854 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He's the face of this wide receiving core, and he is going to have to be one of those players to watch. Could be an X factor in terms of this passing game. But those are the keys for Oklahoma State. Now for Baylor, it should be clear, as much as the rushing game is important for Oklahoma State, this Bears rushing attack is the focal point of this team week in and week out. But they're going to have by far their toughest test of the season, as Oklahoma State has the number one ranked rushing defense in the Big 12, only allowing 93 yards per game on the ground and only 9 rushing touchdowns all season long. This narrative that there's no defense in the Big 12 is old. It's outdated. If you say that, I know you haven't been watching Big 12 football, because there are some great defenses in this conference, including these two teams, but especially Knowles' defense at Oklahoma State. But Baylor's in a class of their own, man, in terms of rushing the football. They rank number one in the Big 12 with over 227 rushing yards per game. No other team in the conference averages over 200. Texas is second with 199. But the Bears ranked seventh in the entire country in rushing offense. So they are going to pound the football. And it starts with, I think, one of the breakout players of the year in the Big 12, Abram Smith, man. 1,300 rushing yards, 6.5 yards per carry, 12 rushing touchdowns. In the Big 12, he's second in rushing yards, fourth in rushing touchdowns, and fourth in yards per carry. He's one of the best backs in this conference, and he's really been a key piece to this Baylor rebuild under Aranda. Also, Treston Ebner, over 700 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. This guy's a top 10 running back in the Big 10, in the Big 12 as well, with in terms of rushing yards, and he's going to be the rotational piece. And they have a nice 1-2 punch with Ebner and Abram Smith. But then also, as much as we don't know what the quarterback situation is going to look like, if Jerry Bohannon gets the start, he's also a factor with his legs, with 9 rushing touchdowns and 300 rushing yards. So his legs are going to become a factor, especially in the red zone. But we'll get to his health in a second. But I mentioned last weekend, I mentioned this, the last preview I did for Baylor, but this rushing attack is successful because of the versatility of how they can attack you with the run. They're extremely creative and flexible with their rushing offense, but off the edge, man, is where they're dangerous. Over 1,100 rushing yards, almost 8 yards per carry, 8 touchdowns, 60 first downs, and over 40 explosive plays generated. That's where they hit the big play, and that's where you see these high yards per carries, and that's where they establish drives and drive right down the field. It can put some points up with their rushing attack, and that's why you see them having a top 10 rushing attack in the country, because teams have not been able to set the edge, and the teams have not been able to make open field tackles. Smith and Ebner and Bohannon have been able to make people miss in the open space, and it's going to be a real test for this Oklahoma State defense to see if they can bring them down. This rushing attack is extremely important, I understand, but the downfield passing attack builds off of the run so much, man, as Bohannon's dropbacks are really built off the play action at times. Now, he missed last week due to a hamstring injury, but Blake Shapen has stepped in at quarterback, led them to a win over Texas Tech, held on against Kansas State. And for me, whoever ends up at quarterback for the Bears are going to have to make a handful of throws for their team. Now, Bohannon over 2,100 yards passing, 17 passing touchdowns, those 9 rushing. He's a top 5 passer in touchdowns, completion percentage, and yards in the conference. While Shapen has also has had great success in his limited action, over 400 yards passing, over 7 yards of completion, 2 passing touchdowns, no interceptions in about a week and a half of action. And like I said, he was really the catalyst for getting past Texas Tech last week and also getting a big win over Kansas State on the road. But the big difference is you're going to see more play action with Bohannon. Almost 45% of his dropbacks are off the play action, in which over 1,100 of his yards come off of that. 13 passing touchdowns, 6 big time throws, and has almost a 90 PFF passing grade. That is where Bohannon thrives. But when you look at Shapen, that's only about 29% of his dropbacks. He's done a better job at creating plays using his intermediate routes and concepts for the Baylor offense. So basing off those intermediate routes and passing concepts, that's where Shapen's really going to test this Oklahoma State defense. Now, those are the keys for the Bears, and we've went over the keys for Oklahoma State. Now, the matchup to watch for me this weekend is going to be a strength versus strength battle between the Baylor offensive line against this Oklahoma State front seven. Both of these units have been the key for each of these programs' success this year. Baylor has the number one offense in the Big 12, while Oklahoma State has the number one defense in the country in the conference. So it's one versus one in this matchup with the Baylor offensive line against Oklahoma State's front seven. That's going to be a huge key, and it's going to be so important this weekend to see who can come out ahead in this matchup. Now, Baylor's offensive line ranks number one in the Big 12. Only 12 sacks allowed this season. That's ninth in the entire country. And the offensive line has been a key for the Bears having one of the best rushing attacks in the country as well. And is also deserves a lot of credit for allowing Bohannon to grow into his starting QB role this year for the Bears. And it starts with two guys. Connor Galvin at left tackle and Khalil Keith, who has seen time at left guard and right tackle. Galvin's the highest graded pass blocker on the offensive line at a 90.3 pass blocking grade. No sacks allowed, only one QB hit allowed, only 3 total pressures this season. While Keith, the second highest graded at an 80.1 passing grade, 0 sacks allowed, 2 QB hits, only 6 total pressures. They are going to have to be the anchors on this front five. But overall, as a unit, Baylor's offensive line has been one of the most impressive in the country this year. But when you look at Oklahoma State's defense, man, it leads the Big 12 and the entire country. They're number one in the NCAA in sacks this season with 49 sacks this year. That's over 4 sacks per game. And it's been a huge factor in Oklahoma State having the number 3 defense in the country, allowing less than 280 yards per game. You look at Colin Oliver, Devin Harper, Brock Martin, and Malcolm Rodriguez are probably the 4 names you need to know in that front seven. Oliver, 8.5 sacks, which leads to Cowboys, 12.5 tackles for loss, and 27 QB hurries. And then you're looking for a do-it-all linebacker. That is Devin Harper, man. 6 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, 80 total tackles, and is the highest graded pass rusher on the team at an 88.2 PFF pass rush grade. But then, man, combined with a Malcolm Rodriguez, 3 sacks, 106 total tackles, 14.5 tackles for loss, and 13 QB hurries, Harper and Rodriguez might be the best linebacking duo Baylor has seen all season long, and they're going to be key in having to slow down this rushing attack and also keeping Bohannon in the pocket and away from using his legs to be dynamic. So this is going to be a giant matchup to watch this weekend between the Baylor front five versus the front seven of Oklahoma State. Now, man, going back, I went back and watched my preview from this game when I covered this game early October on the channel, and I went with Baylor. Ended up completely losing that game. And since then, I've picked both of these teams in almost every single game that we've covered, man. I've been riding with both of these teams. I'm a huge fan of Dave Aranda, huge fan of this Jim Knowles defense. But for me, man, looking at the second matchup, it's so hard to beat a team twice. So hard. But when I look at Oklahoma State, I've said they're one of the only teams in the country that you could say have gotten better every single week of the season, man. They've slowly improved, and I think this defense is playing at such a high level that it's going to cause Baylor some problems. And I really do think we see a low-scoring game, and I just trust Oklahoma State's defense to make a play to win this game. I don't know if their offense is better than Baylor's, but I think the defense as a unit is one of the best in the entire country, and I think defense wins championships, and that's always been the motto. I think Jim Knowles makes a statement this weekend in Oklahoma State's defense, and 1 or 2 plays by Jalen Warren this weekend win Oklahoma State the Big 12 title. I have Oklahoma State winning this one 20-13 over Baylor in Arlington and Jerry World this weekend. So a 7-point win for the Cowboys. Oklahoma State 20, Baylor 13. Guys, make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe now and comment your score predictions below to enter our Game of the Week giveaway, man. I appreciate y'all choosing the Bluebloods to get your college football content. We have more previews dropping this afternoon, along with a bunch of previews coming later in the week, man. So make sure to tune into all those. You can check out our conference championship playlist right here on our channel. It'll be linked at the end of the video too, man. But I appreciate y'all tuning in. I got Oklahoma State winning the Big 12 title this year in a 20-13 over Baylor, man. So make sure to comment your score predictions below. And I'll see y'all this afternoon with more conference championship previews. But for right now, man, the Blue Bloods are out.